Heribert Lange, One Last Café. Kim, Between Love and Murder, novel. Chapter 3. In Berlin.
I am always struck with amazement when I notice how small everything is here. But there is no place like home. Sunday passed quickly, filled with the everyday things like unpacking suitcases, washing, drying, putting away, sorting, and the like. The usual madness that awaits you after a vacation. I woke up just after 6. The alarm was not set to go off until 7, but I was too excited and had therefore woken up early that morning. Shower, get dressed, coffee, and I was already on my way to work on the BVG. I opened the office door and was immediately spotted by Olga, who called out loudly,
"Hello, Casey. You're back."
Of course, my name is not Casey. My name is Kim Collins, abbreviated KC, but everyone pronounced that KC as Casey after the sleeping prophet. I walked over to her, greeted her warmly, and handed her a small bouquet of flowers I had already bought on the way, for she was the pearl of the office. My boss was standing in his doorway, looked at me with a frown, and shouted,
"Where have you been? What are you doing? Why don't you answer your phone? I called you 20 times and you don't pick up."
He held his cell phone out to me to prove that he had called. At that moment, the phone rang. From the speaker behind us, a voice bellowed,
"Ringelschwänzchen, why do you keep calling me? You know I'm at the hairdresser and can't answer."
My boss looked around in bewilderment, put the phone on mute, and mumbled something into it that no one could understand. Involuntarily, my gaze dropped to my boss's little curly tail. In reality, Eduard von Dukstein, and his nickname was Eddie. He had a problem. He was constantly falling in love, and this time it seemed as though his feelings were being returned. Naturally, he was now seeing everything through rose-colored glasses. Olga snorted into her coffee cup, and the coffee splattered onto her desk, hitting some papers. She immediately reached for the tissue box to minimize the damage with the napkins. She dabbed at the notes, which were lying on a sheet of plastic, and suddenly she froze. Her gaze came to rest on one of those letters. There, where nothing had been written before, she clearly read, "Hi." I was home again. How much I had missed this little office. Office. What a grand name for the small 3-room apartment that our agency had rented. Through the front door you stumbled right into the first room, which was dominated by the enormous desk where Olga held court, serving as office, reception, telephone exchange, and coordination center all in one. Next to the door on the left stood a bench for waiting visitors who rarely appeared. In the corner on the other side, between the 2 doors, was a small table with 3 comfortable armchairs, where client meetings occasionally took place. The left door led into a small hallway and into the kitchen, now more of a storage room for printers, scanners, and the equipment we needed for our work. Only a small portion still served its original purpose as a kitchen and was reserved for making tea or coffee. The door next to the kitchen led to the restroom area. The second door next to the armchairs and opposite the entrance opened onto Eddie's domain. He was still standing in the doorway and now motioned for me to follow him into his office. Eddie, now fully composed again in his role as boss and focused on the matter at hand, closed the door behind me as I entered. I sat down at his desk and waited until he had settled into his chair. He leaned conspiratorially across the table and murmured to me,
"We are back in business. 2 new cases since Friday, and it seems to be worth our while."
Our agency was not the largest and certainly not the most sought after in town. In fact, I would go so far as to say that none of us could really live off these meager earnings. We ran it out of a love for the work. Nobody really needed to work, but everyone had their past. Olga was the Mimi type. Yes, exactly. Without a mystery, Mimi never goes to bed. From earliest childhood, she had grown up with crime stories, had discovered her love of detective work, and was now living it out. Eddie had grown up with Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson and felt called to greater things. And me? Well, I was always James Bond, only I never quite had the way with women. While Eddie drew it out, pausing at length after his first euphoric opening, my gaze wandered across the desk. Tidy as always, to my right the old globe, to my left the old-fashioned telephone. Well, it no longer had a rotary dial, but instead buttons in a number that would have done credit to an open-plan office. An ashtray and a pipe. Anyone who knew Eddie knew that he did not smoke, but his idol Holmes did, and so they were part of the decor like the countless books on the wall, of which he had probably read very few. I had long suspected that he had brought them here from his grandfather's estate. There were no flowers, and only one picture hung on the wall, which was not really a picture at all. Although neatly framed, it showed a map of Berlin. Eddie stood up, turned toward the open window with a concerned look, and closed it. After all, secrets were our business.
Chapter 4. The First Case.
He sat back down and continued.
2 cases.
He repeated emphatically.
I leave it up to you which one you want to take. Which one appeals to you more?
I looked him curiously in the eyes and said nothing for a long time. Then I decided, I'll take the second one. Eddie's eyes widened in surprise, but that spark was suddenly extinguished, and he put on his brooding face.
Which one is the second case?
He now wanted to know out of the blue. I burst out laughing and said, half ironically, Well, if you don't know, who does? The master detective now recognized his mistake, having not yet told me anything about the cases. He now eagerly made up for this. Eddie would have made a fine addition to the Vienna Burg Theater, the way he looked at me conspiratorially and reported,
I will number the cases in order of receipt. The first is a case of adultery, or the suspicion thereof. We are to investigate what lies behind it. The woman came by in person and already left a thick envelope as an advance payment. She must have seen something like that on television. Usually, we bill by the hour with an invoice at the end of a case. Just before her, a messenger arrived and brought a thick letter that is now sitting on Olga's desk. However, since we did not open it until after the woman had left, it became the second case. You have already made your choice, and so our course of action is set. Olga will explain your case to you.
So that was it, a marital drama. What a drama. Child's play would probably be a better description. I was happy to leave Eddie his case and left him, closing the door behind me without a word. I smiled at Olga as I passed and winked at her conspiratorially. I'll be right with you, I said, and went through the right door leading to my office, to first take the laptop out of my briefcase and place it on my desk, and also to take off the light coat that had been protecting me from the cool autumn air. For despite the brief stay in England, I was not yet accustomed to these temperatures again. Vietnam is always summer. Well, when it is not raining. Nothing had changed here since I had left it weeks ago. I set aside my desire to sit down first and decided to keep my promise to Olga right away. I went to her. I left my door open and sat down next to Olga, who had set out a chair for me and also immediately slid over a tea, British style, just the way I love it. Earl Grey with a little sugar and cream. Olga smiled at me.
It's so nice to have you back. I missed you. Yes, very much even. Ever since Eddie met his Emona, he has barely paid any attention to me. Luckily, 2 cases have now come in, and he is back at work again, even if he is still very distracted and seems somewhat confused at times. You got a taste of that today with the phone calls.
Emona? What an unusual name. Sounds lovely.
Yes, she is. Without a doubt. She is apparently from Croatia. Eddie is not very talkative, but that much I picked up. I am genuinely happy for him. But I am glad that things are moving again around here. The summer was bone dry. At least here in the office. Outside it was rather unusually wet, so you would have to call it a rainy summer. Apparently that is all due to climate change.
She now slid the letter over to me, and I clearly read in large letters, "Help." It no longer just said, "Hi." Olga gave me a knowing smile.
I figured that if something was written on the letter that did not belong there, there might be more to it. And I was, as I would like to mention here, as always, right. Someone must have written a secret call for help on this letter, presumably with lemon juice, in the hope that we would not overlook it. Well, that was probably a bit too much crime show knowledge. But there are no coincidences. And so Ringelschwänzchen led us on to the trail.
I briefly skimmed the letter and flipped through the following pages. A kidnapping. Now that is truly something exciting, and we are being asked to help. Of course, the kidnappers had already made it clear. No police. What else was the poor man, yes, it was a man, whose wife had apparently been kidnapped, supposed to do to get help, other than turn to us? I looked up into Olga's clear, water-blue eyes. You have already read everything?
Yes, of course. I have already printed out maps of the relevant addresses and looked up some additional information. The woman is apparently a well-known independent journalist, presumably working covertly and known in alternative circles.
Olga slid some papers over to me.
Tonight at 8 again?
Somewhat distracted by the information, I nodded. Then, pulling myself together, yes, of course. I will never miss our Monday date. I have been away from the city for quite a long time now. There is some catching up to do.
Some date,
Said Olga, and nudged me in the direction of my office. I stood up. Thanks, and went into my office, closing the door behind me with the files and the half cup of tea. I sank into the very comfortable armchair and spun around in it once. Everything was as always, but Olga had clearly been wiping away the dust of time now and then, so it looked familiar, but also spotlessly clean. My desk was empty, except for the laptop I had just placed there. The filing cabinet next to the locked window was bolted shut. The leaves of the spider plant hung down from above. The heavy, dark curtain that could almost completely black out the window and let virtually no sound escape to the outside was neatly pulled to one side, so that I could look out through the window into the courtyard. It was not going to get properly bright today. Autumn was showing its dark side.
Chapter 5. The second case.
I stood up, took the desk lamp from the shelf behind me and placed it on the table. Then I plugged in the cord. Without hesitation, I switched it on and pulled my chair closer to the table, then opened the files. I read through the text twice carefully and summarized it. Fritz Herbert Reiners was reporting his wife as kidnapped. So far, so good, although the text was quite lengthy and described alleged sequences of events that were largely illogical or fabricated. What struck me most was the fact that the kidnappers were making no demands, apart from keeping the police out of it. An address and phone number had been noted. I needed to meet Fritz Herbert Reiners to find out more. Surveillance of the person, or even his sources of communication such as mail and telephone, could not be ruled out, as I suspected monitoring by the other side. I needed to make contact without being noticed. Without hesitating, I dialed Torsten's familiar number. He picked up after the second ring with,
"Good day, Kim. You're back in the office."
"How right you are. I'll keep it brief. I need your help again."
What else? It's not like you'd want to invite me to dinner.
I let the gentle dig pass and decided to surprise him with an invitation sometime. "Yes, you're right. Do you have anything in the pipeline?"
Of course, that's my job.
"Wonderful. I need one of your delivery boys, one who is discreet and very reliable."
What should he do?
His job, of course, distributing flyers, going from mailbox to mailbox. Only at certain houses he should ring the bell and hand over the flyers in person and deliver a special message to one particular person. I'll send you the street and the specific address by email and attach the letter right away, okay?
That's a piece of cake. No problem. You know me. Only today and maybe tomorrow won't work, but Wednesday it will be delivered 100%.
You're a gem, and owe me one again. I hung up, only to dial another familiar number right away.
Susanne?
I cut my sister off immediately. "It's me, Kim. Just wanted to say a quick hello and let you know that I landed safely and am already at the office working. And this time, it's really exciting,"
Then let James Bond off the leash.
she said, laughing, and hung up. I stood up, opened the door, and went to Olga to pass on the relevant information and to ask for another cup of tea. Olga would compose the email to Torsten and the cover letter to Fritz Herbert. She was fully up to speed. I returned to my office, but this time left the door open, as I was expecting Olga shortly with the confirmation and the tea. Now I let my gaze fall on the wall opposite the window. So many pictures hung there, pictures of my families. I could not help but smile at my own thought. Yes, who can claim to have more than one family? Certainly not many. Surely there would be room to add 2 or 3 more pictures from my last trip. Olga brought me the tea and a printed copy of the email, which I briefly skimmed and placed with the file. I opened the filing cabinet, took out one of the countless empty folders, and filed the documents inside. My day's work was done for today. There was nothing more to take care of at the moment. Everything had been set in motion. Until Torsten reported back, or Fritz Herbert made contact, there was nothing further to do. And so, after finishing my tea, I left my office. Olga was busy typing something for Eddie and only glanced up briefly.
"You're leaving?"
"Yes, I'd like to get home before dark."